Welcome to the Sirius report. This is obviously Paul, and we're coming back to the theme of talking about China and Chinese technology, and particularly military technology, and how they are continuing to make huge strides forward, which is causing enormous consternation, fear inside the United States, particularly because they're the ones who have a problem with the Chinese, more than obviously Europeans, even the United Kingdom. And in that regard, it's worth noting the following, that we always regarded in naval terms submarines to be the thing that would be, particularly modern submarines, being able to detect them is rather difficult, in fact, nigh on impossible, as opposed to aircraft carriers, etc. Well, China can now detect US Sea Wolf class submarines with what is termed magnetic wake tracking. So basically that would render stealth, which was previously an impossible feat for submarines, or was, not an impossible feat, but actually worked, would now be impossible because Chinese scientists have found a way to detect what you might term even the quietest vessels. Effectively, US Sea-class submarines would then have trouble evading the Chinese military because of this technology, which detects the underwater vessels by harnessing magnetic fields, which is generated by their so-called wakes. So, for example, for US submarines operating in China or the waters near China, this absolute stealth would therefore quite literally come to an end. And that alone is pretty worrying and a huge groundbreaking change in military technology. So effectively, researchers in the so-called Northwestern Polytechnical University in Xi'an said they've developed this method which detects vessels by, as I say, harnessing these magnetic fields. This would reshape naval warfare like we have never seen in decades. So what they did is the team modelled this so-called V-shaped surface disturbance created by submarines as they move through the water, and they generate a faint but detectable magnetic field when seawater ions interact with the Earth's geomagnetic field. So they did the so-called numerical simulations, and researchers then quantified how these magnetic structures vary depending on a submarine's speed, the depth it's at, and the size. So basically, if you increase speed by 2.5 meters per second, it boosts magnetic intensity tenfold. And if you reduce depth by 20 meters, it doubles the field strength. And obviously longer submarines produce weaker fields, whilst wider hulls amplify them. So they went through all these simulations and obviously came to these conclusions. Now, typically, Seawolf class submarines travel at around 12.5 meters per second at a depth of about 30 meters. So the wake's magnetic field is well within the sensitivity range of existing airborne so-called magnetometers. So this team's method was obviously detailed in a peer-reviewed article, and it has dramatically changed the perspective of how you can detect, for example, C-class submarines. It is really a complete challenge now to the US's capability to have submarine stealth. The thing that's quite interesting in this regard is quite a lot of people associated with the United States have long since believed that advanced submarines like the Seawolf class could move through waters completely undetected, and said that deploying therefore a large number of drones to prevent the Chinese Navy, for example, landing on the island of Taiwan. Now, that assumption's gone out the window because they've created this technique to identify these submarines. And the fact they've obviously been able to relate this to speed, depth, and size of submarine also makes a huge difference. So the question, therefore, is if the United States has intentions in any way, shape, or form to show aggression in the Indo-Pacific, as they call it, and particularly in shallow waters, which they are in the Straits of Taiwan, they'll be spotted immediately. So Chinese, therefore, is also combining magnetic tracking with acoustics, satellites, drones, and AI, which forms this so-called kill web detection network to counter US submarines along its actual shores, and also in the first and second chain islands. So, in essence, this is revolutionizing naval warfare. It's once again China leading the way with technology. And again, it just shows that it's not just Russia who is militarily light years ahead. China is increasingly developing technologies, in this case, with respect to submarines, which makes them proverbially light years ahead. And therefore, it's something worthy of our discussion and note. And it's also worth noting that there are now beliefs that China's basically been tracking every submarine on Earth in real time for quite a long time, because it's always one of these things when they come out and say something, the technology usually isn't brand new. And they do tend to time their announcement to coincide with statements or other events. So, for example, when Gina Raimondo visited Beijing, Huawei came out announcing their new phone, the Mate 60 Pro. And I think the fact that China's now coming out with stating that they also can have all this superior global submarine tracking capabilities actually coincides with Australia and the United States talking about developing these nuclear-powered submarines. And I don't believe it was a coincidence. So therefore, I think it's worthy of our attention, and it's not something that is discussed readily anywhere, particularly not the mainstream media, but also very rarely in sources like such as ours. And with regards to stealth and stealth technology, it's also worth noting the following, that Chinese researchers now say they can detect, for example, F-35 jets from more than 1,800 kilometers away via its engine exhaust plume. Basically, what happens is they say a stratospheric airship which is equipped with advanced infrared detection systems can identify stealth aircraft such as the US-made F-35 from ranges even as much as 2,000 kilometers. This, therefore, would suggest another vulnerability in US fifth-generation stealth technology and marks a huge, significant jump in China's pursuit of what is termed anti-access area denial capabilities. So, researchers in Changchun Institute of Optics, which is a major player in China's missile and space programs, analyzed the infrared signature of F-35s in simulated combat scenarios that would have involved, for example, of course, Taiwan. Now, the team found that whilst the jet's radar-absorbing coating and exterior cooled to an average 281 degrees Kelvin, which is about nearly 8 degrees Celsius, or 46 Fahrenheit, effectively masking it from traditional detection, its engine exhaust plume, which reaches nearly 1,000 Kelvin, emitted infrared radiation 3 orders of magnitude stronger than its airframe. Now, by focusing on a particular wavelength range where atmospheric interference is minimal, and they deployed these detectors and aperture telescopes, this unmanned airship which, hovering at about 20 kilometers, could spot an F-35's rear thermal signature more than 1,800 kilometers away, up to 2,000 kilometers away, when the aircraft was viewed from the side or behind. It's also worth noting detection from the front remained limited to 350 kilometers because of the stealth jet's reduced forward heat profile. So, okay, granted, it does have some deficiencies, but how often is it always going to be the jet is flying head on towards you from the side and behind is perfectly feasible to be able to detect it. And again, this is not only putting, as we've just discussed in the previous segment, submarine in jeopardy. This is now related to F-35s also, because this is a game changer in stealth technology. It's a huge leap in China's pursuit of defense capabilities, because the F-35's rear thermal signature is now exposed, because China, as we said, scientists have targeted infrared emission, and this is a complete revolution in terms of detection systems. This advances China's aerospace technology, also strengthens their defense capabilities. So this again demonstrates to the United States that any military advantage they think they have is not there. And if there's any provocations with the Chinese, and then not only will submarines be at risk, but also, of course, in this case, F-35s. Now, I'm not a fan of the F-35. I think they've wasted $1 trillion+ on a worthless flying tin can. But it just does demonstrate that even some of the capabilities that are potentially useful for the US in flying them have now been rendered completely inert. And it's just something else, obviously, for the United States to have to think about, along with all the other concerns they have about military advantages that the Chinese and, of course, the Russians possess. And in terms of military capability, it's not exclusively something applied to military technology, is machine learning. Because Chinese researchers from Tianjin University and Tsinghua University have jointly developed what is called the world's first dual-loop, non-invasive, so-called brain-computer interface, or BCI, system, which achieves a new breakthrough in human-machine mutual learning. Now, they've used this system to successfully achieve real-time control, for example, of a drone, during which the system not only offers higher precision and lower energy consumption, but critically can also handle far more complex tasks. Now, in terms of so-called practical BCI, that should be able to decipher brain signals and adapt to brain fluctuations, but that requires a decoder capable of being able to flexibly provide updates with energy-efficient decoding capabilities. Now, these studies have shown that the system can be used for the real-time control of a drone in 4 degrees of freedom. They've also developed this interactive update framework that allows the decoder and the changing brain signals to adapt to each other, but to achieve mutual learning between the brain and the machine through information exchange is clearly both key and also quite a challenging focus of current BCI research. But mutual learning is critical in BCI technologies because it facilitates effective collaboration between the human brain and machine systems. Specifically, mutual learning allows machine systems to adjust according to users' intentions, enhancing both its flexibility and autonomy. So this dual-loop brain-computer collaborative framework allows the learning loops of the brain and the machine collaboration to jointly enhance system performance. So the results would therefore show that this new approach would improve decoding speed and reduce energy consumption compared to traditional methods. Now, the system can be improved in the future into portable or wearable BCI devices for long-term interaction, both between the brain and external environments, or devices in daily life and medical rehabilitation scenarios. It can also be applied in closed-loop neural modulation applications, in medical rehabilitation. That might relate to neurological problems or helping stroke patients to regain motor functions. The applications are unlimited. It can certainly be used in the military context, and therefore it's not just a game changer in the context of the military, but with civilian and commercial applications. Again, it's just China is constantly evolving, developing new technologies and things that can have multiple applications, and this is another example of that. And I know there are obviously concerns between human machine mutual learning. I understand that, but we're not here to discuss that specifically. We're just trying to highlight the kind of developments China has and why it continues and will continue to lead the world in multiple technologies with multiple applications, because it invests heavily in the research, of course, to make those things possible. And with that, we'll end this podcast. Thank you very much for all your support, for everyone who listens. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. That's very helpful. And just share it to anyone you know, because we're trying to grow the channel and get people to be interested in areas we think are important, areas that inform people. And my old saying, it's better to be informed than to be entertained. And with that, I'll say goodbye.